Lep pozdrav, vesel sem, da vas lahko pozdravim tule v Hostloga Bronka. Zahvaljujem se najprej gostiteljem, oziroma upraviteljem prostora, da so nam dovolili uporabo, potem gospodu županu, ki se nam je pridružil, predstavnikom Stop lažem, skupini na Facebook in drugod, predvsem pa George Webb, hello, welcome.
Hello, Andre.
Simon, moj brat, se bo pogovarjal z skoraj svojim vzornikom, bi lahko rekel, en izmed glavnih virov informacij zanj je on. In gre za enega raziskovalnega novinarja, ki trenutno zaradi vojnega stanja tu v Evropi, posebna priložnost se lahko pogovarjamo z njim in verjamem, da si bomo zapomnili ta pogovor še za dolgo. Izvolite.
My brats too. Yeah. My brats too.
Yeah. So I will also introduce George Webb later in Slovenian than in English. Se pravi, tale dogodek sem poimenoval vprašanje za Georgea Webba, tako da tudi tamle so listi, tako da se lahko na koncu potem bomo naredili še opcijo, da lahko vsak postavi svoje vprašanje. Drugače bi pa jaz na kratko predstavil nekaj besed o Georgeu Webbu v slovenščini, potem pa še v angleščini, potem bo pa nadaljevanje intervjuja v angleščini. Se pravi, George Webb je eden najbolj pronicljivih neodvisnih raziskovalnih novinarjev v ZDA. Njegovo delo spremljam že več kot 5 let in v tem času sem se lahko že ničkolikokrat prepričal, da je njegovo poročanje izjemno prodorno, poglobljeno in nepristransko. Zdaj, ko sem ga spoznal tudi osebno, pa vam lahko zagotovim, da je George Webb tudi krasen človek in pravi prijatelj. Kaj je torej razlog, da je bilo 49 njegovih najbolje prodajanih knjig prepovedanih na Amazonu? Zakaj bi njegov kanal na YouTubeu več kot 20krat izbrisan? Zakaj so njegov profil na Twitterju vdrli hekerji, medtem ko je bil njegov račun na Patreonu zamrznen? Ne glede na to, kako drzne so njegove napovedi, se skoraj vedno izkažejo za pravilne. Številne njegove najbolj udarne zgodbe so celo nekatere izmed največjih medijskih hiš objavili leta potem, ko je v njih poročal George Webb. Kaj je torej tisto, česar nočejo, da bi izvedeli? Po mojem je najbolje, da vprašamo njega. Zdaj pa še to približno z Google prevodom v angleščini predstavil isti material. George Webb is one of the most cutting-edge independent investigative journalists in the United States. I have been following his work for more than 5 years, and during that time I have been convinced that his reporting is extremely penetrating, in-depth and impartial, but now that I have met him personally, I can assure you that George is also an amazing guy and a true friend. So, what's the reason 49 of his best-selling books were banned on Amazon? Why was his YouTube channel wiped out 29 times? Why was his Twitter account hacked and his Patreon account frozen? No matter how bold his predictions are, they are almost always right on the money. Many major news networks broke his stories years after he did. So what it is they don't want you to know? Let's find out.
Okay, well, good job on the introduction.
So for the starters, I would like to tell you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how your journalistic career started.
Well, right before I do that, I want to say thank you to the mayor for providing this wonderful forum for us all to meet in a community like this. That's really incredible. And because we're on the border and we're trying to expand the European community, Shenzhen, good feeling. We visited the border a lot and going over to Croatia. Croatia is going to be moving into the Shenzhen soon. So maybe this whole center is one of those things that sends out the good feelings and makes great stuff like that happen. So anyway, I just want to say thank you to the mayor and thanks to the whole community. Art, culture, not just politics, but everything is here, and it's really been an amazing thing to see over the last week. Okay, done with my thank yous. The reason I never went into journalism. My brother was studying journalism. I was in computers. We all wore shirts like this, high-tech shirts, Cisco, Oracle, Sun Microsystems. I work for Sun, I work for IBM, I work for HP, big American companies, tech companies. But I just happened to work for a company called Network Associates that also employed a guy named Dmitry Alperovich. And he later went on to the Atlantic Council, and then he became the head investigator for the DNC hack, quote unquote hoax hack of the DNC. And I remembered Dmitry from 16 years before, in 2000, when we bought his company from Moscow, 12 hackers, and they wrote viruses. So they were using Dmitry and his group to write the viruses while our people were then selling the antivirus software. Very unethical. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he was running the investigation for the Hillary Clinton hack, it seemed more like a hoax, okay? And every time in everybody's life you have things where you go, well, that's so what, you know, that's just corruption, right? But this was one of those things where I said, I cannot believe this. This can't be happening. This guy I knew that was the hacker is supposed to be the investigator. It's like the fox in the chicken coop, right? Yeah. So that's when I decided to write, and just a little bit on YouTube when I started. I didn't put my face up there. I just had, you know, pointed slides for 9 months, and then people said I didn't exist. They said I was a CIA agent. They said I was a Mossad agent. They said I was a Russia agent. They said everything. So finally I put my face out there and said I'm a real person. So that's kind of how I did this. And gradually over time I just stopped working and started doing this more. I sold 2 of my houses to finance this, and I've been doing this ever since, 6 years. So
okay.
That's
the next question is, what brought you to Europe?
This guy named Simon did a video about Melania Trump.
I didn't, yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, I came to Europe because a lot of my stories about Europe. Dmitry Alperovich, the guy I told you about with the hack, or was it a hoax? He was Atlantic Council, and he was from Ukraine. And a lot of the people that were being infiltrated into the Republican campaign in 2016 were from Ukraine and NATO. So there was Italians, there was Dutch, there was French, there was a lot of Europeans. And in Europe, I think people know a lot more what NATO means than the United States. Every once in a while, there'll be a parade in Norfolk, Virginia about NATO. That's all people know about NATO. You know, there's a little flag, there's a little thing, but they don't know its military exercises. When I first was in Europe playing basketball, I was in a town with a U.S. tank base. So it's different when the nuclear war happens in your backyard. It's different than when it's over an ocean away. So I think I came to Europe just to research and go up close and personal to stories I've been covering over the last 5 years, and also meet people who follow me. So
yeah. So well, this is just so that we know a little bit about your background, but now let's jump right into Ukrainian-Russia situation. You were trying to visit Azovstal in Mariupol. Why is Azovstal such an important aspect of Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Okay, well, for those who don't know, Azovstal is this bunker, big bunker, where the whole kind of war is focusing right now in Ukraine. There's probably somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 of these Azov battalion guys who are sort of a right-wing group, extremist group, in not really a part of the regular Ukrainian army. It looks like they've taken civilians down there, including children, up to 1,000. Yeah. So you have like a Waco times 100 about ready to happen. Okay, so there's a lot of suspense in Azovstal. Of course, there's been some humanitarian where some kids got out 3 days ago, a little bit more got out 2 days ago, a little bit more one. But the whole world wants all the kids out, and they want all the women out who aren't involved in this, and then they want this thing to be peacefully resolved. So that's why it's important. It's where all the focus is right now. And for me, it could mean that the secrets of a illegal NATO bioagent program is also kept in there.
In the pit.
In the dungeon down there.
Yes.
And we don't know if it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
We've been given indications that there's a general who's involved with the bioagents from Canada, this CADIU, C-A-D-I-E-U, may be involved. He supposedly had a bioweapons unit, maybe 18, maybe 35 employees. Maybe there was more association with more of the bioweapons. But everybody in Europe has a right to know if NATO's developing bioagents to be used in any kind of war, in any country. So this is a really important story to Europe, I think.
Because the proposition is not, this is not out of, this is very realistic proposition, because we know that there's many biolabs in Ukraine and in countries around Ukraine. Let's say Georgia is one aspect. That's probably the one that you first heard about by Dilyana report.
Yeah, there's a great reporter out of Bulgaria named Dilyana, and she originally had papers, documents that talked about how the U.S. State Department, under diplomatic immunity, hiding it from the American people, hiding it from NATO, were running this campaign of developing biological agents. Okay,
Yes.
in the old Soviet Union facilities. So if the satellite countries peeled away, like Ukraine, like Georgia, like Kazakhstan, the State Department was buying up the facilities, hiring all the guys who used to work there, keeping all the things they were working on, and continuing the programs. Now, they were saying it's for defense, but it's a double-edged sword when you work on these things. So that's, Ukraine was interesting because when I started following this in 2017, Dilyana first broke the story in 2018. There was only 11 biolabs in Ukraine. Now there's 30. Yeah. Anytime you see a buildup like that, it's usually a precedent to warfare. And there was charges by the Russians, we don't know if it's disinformation or not, that there was use of bioagents in Donbass the last 8 years in sort of a bioethnic cleansing, and that's not good. There was even charges that it went into affect animals into Russia. Again, could be disinformation, but we need to find the facts out.
Yeah.
So
excuse me, but when you say bioagents, I'm it's probably an ignorant question, but what are we talking about here?
well, there's kind of two classes. One's bacteria, so pneumonia, the things that kills people with pneumonia you've experienced is bacteria. There's other things like anthrax that are even more deadly, and brucella and other bacteria. The Russians worked on those. And then there are things, the viruses, everybody knows coronavirus, and some of the more serious effects can be death.
And as far as I know, they also made some gain-of-function research on coronavirus there in Ukraine, right? Or not?
Well, you know, we don't know yet. We do, other labs that I did visit in Europe did for sure do gain-of-function on coronavirus, as well as influenza, which is another one. That's the one that caused the Spanish flu. So these are serious 100 million killing pandemic things. It's not to, be ignored. But there was documentation. Again, we don't have the vials and the scientists talking about it, but we have documentation, 3 different releases by the Russians saying this was the thing that they were planning on doing with hemorrhagic fevers. Congo, Crimea hemorrhagic fever. Some other ones like...
Which is very serious. Hemorrhagic fevers means bleeding, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like Ebola is a hemorrhagic fever, or Marburg virus is a hemorrhagic fever, Nipah virus, and all these things basically cause all your blood or all your cells to swell and then burst like water balloons. Yeah. And then you die from...
internal bleeding.
And dehydration, yeah. So not good. And the Russians say that they were trying to preempt an attack. Now, I'm not saying that's true.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm just covering what the Russians said, which is Lavrov said they were preempting an attack. So we have to see if it's true or if it's not. We can't just say, okay, well, Russia said it, so it has to be a lie. We have to look at both sides.
Yeah, because the war in Ukraine didn't start with the Russian invasion into Ukraine. It started 8 years ago with the overthrow of democratically elected president. According to the UN, More people died in Donbass before the Russian invasion than Slovenians during the Second World War. How come pretty much no one in the mainstream media noticed that before the Russian invasion into Ukraine? Where was their compassion for Ukrainian people then?
That's a good question. I think you being here in Slovenia and being a part of the old Yugoslavia, you know about the wars here, you know about the Western influence in NATO here better than anybody. You know about the Bosnian War, you know about the Croatian War, you know about the Kosovo War, you know about Vojvodina, you know that people can exert outside influence, you know that people can fly in mujahideen from Afghanistan and then use Albania as an aircraft carrier to create all these troubles. And what I've seen here in my week here, is the Croatian people and the Slovenian people love each other. We're putting up labor polls together. We're drinking wine together. We're having a great time. I've been to Croatia. I just did a trip to Croatia. I don't see any of that anymore. No, I don't see that. I think those things were created by outside people who had a different agenda. They wanted a pipeline, or they wanted something, or they wanted everyone to have a small government so that they could trample on and put it all into a world government, or some other agenda. And I think that same thing is happening in Ukraine. The people who are being put in power have, especially media people, are paid to tell one story. Of course, Stop Lying Media is not one of those. No. Thank God for Stop the Lying Media. But we need more Stop the Lying Medias. But most of them, George Soros, Open Society Foundation, Open Forum Foundation, they fund all these folks who tell their story, which is, don't say anything about the last 8 years, 15,000 people dead in the Donbass, don't say anything about that. It's all just started right now with the invasion of Ukraine. And this reminds me so much of the sort of the Muslim terrorists, the Mujahideen, attacking Milosevic in Serbia and poking the eye of Milosevic, and then eventually you had
the response.
You had the horrific response. Srebrenica was a horrible response, but then that was used to break up all of Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
So, and I think the same thing's happening. They want to do the same thing with Russia. I think that's the end goal here, is that oil in the Baku, they want to carve this thing up in the same way that Yugoslavia was carved. Southern Russia, the area between Ukraine and the Baku. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go. Stop the Lying Media are very interested in coronavirus research and vaccinations and stuff like that. And we already mentioned coronavirus. So, well, your neighborhood news hour, and you together, you were working on that research for a long time and covering it. So you were trying to track down where the outbreak started. Can you tell us? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, let's go back to how you normally do an outbreak. Okay. The outbreak for, I believe it was typhoid, when before you knew anything about what caused things, there was all these deaths in London, okay, and they had no idea what's causing this. They had no idea. So one guy, he was not a scientist, he was not a doctor. Mm-hmm. He got red pins, and he put pins where everybody died, and just like dot
on a map.
And it all went to one house on the Thames River, okay? And he went into the house and looked at everybody, and he went and interviewed everybody who had family members that had died, and started looking at what things were in common with all the people that died. And they all looked out the window, and there in the middle of the square was one pump that they all used for their water. And they said, well, try not to use that pump. And it turned out that was how, that epidemiology, without any science knowledge, was how we figured out typhoid. That there was waste coming down the Thames, and then this pump was drawing it up, and then okay, that started science, right? So that's all I did. This is why CNN leveled on me, and 60 Minutes leveled on me, and everything. All I did was say, okay, tell me about in Wuhan where we had 1 million people in a gathering, maybe 100,000 volunteers, maybe 10,000 athletes, all coming together in Wuhan, with people coming from all over the world, 100 or more different countries.
And then going back and spreading the disease.
And then going back, because that's the only way you could have it going to 100 different countries,
yes.
right? And it was the Wuhan Military Games, okay? And I didn't start that rumor. That was just my analysis. The foreign minister of China, who would have the best information about China's health, okay, said that the Americans brought it to Wuhan. The Chinese foreign minister, Li Jian, said that they brought it to him. And it was U.S. delegation, kind of implying that it was the State Department. Again, like Dilyana was saying, State Department. So that's all I was doing, is saying, okay, let's see if this guy's right. See if the data matches up. Yep, it's all right there. It's all, it matches all the things that would be a fire starter for a pandemic. And then I looked and said, boom, there's one gal who works for the top person at NATO, and she also is State Department. And I looked at her data, and she'd been to China in 2017. She'd been, or at least her devices had been to China in 2017 and been to China in 2018 and to Singapore in 2019, where they were doing a lot of coronavirus research. And then we found another woman with the same last name who was getting all the bids. All the bids for coronavirus were coming to her. And not only were all the bids coming to coronavirus for her for this one, but all the bids for Zika virus were coming to her. And all the bids for Ebola, when the Ebola crisis happened, were all coming to her. And she was also getting all the bids for Wellcome Trust. So they're coming into the WHO, but then she was double dipping in her back pocket with the Wellcome Trust. And that didn't seem right when you start putting things in your back pocket. So all those things came together, and we started looking at the details.
Could you explain what you mean with bids? What is that? Financial.
Financial bid.
Amount that came to her. Or?
Well, what happens when there's an outbreak? Let's say with coronavirus, and you. This was before the World Military Games. They put out a document. This Virginia Benassi was her name. She works for the WHO, and they said, here are the 5 things that we think is going to happen in the next 5 years. Coronavirus, anthrax, brucellosis, 2 other ones, Zika, and maybe 1 other one. Send us your proposal, but we're going to change how we did it in the past. We have this new format and this new platform that we want everybody to conform to. Send us your proposal. So it's a proposal. And they all went to this one person, Benassi V at WHO.int. So I had one Benassi working for NATO at the State Department. I had another Benassi getting all the bids for coronavirus. Turned out the head of the procurement for NATO was another Benassi, Giuseppe. He also ran the spy school in Oberammergau in Germany. There's another one who is running the Italian intelligence, where they had a breakout in September of 2019. He's also the nuncio to the Pope. I mean, there was a lot of Benassis. And since then, we've had a whole bunch more. So all I was doing what any investigative journalist would do, is say, is there a pattern? And then research the patterns. And that's how 60 Minutes, when they did the story, they said, well, we don't want to talk about NATO. We don't want to talk about the State Department. We don't want to talk about the bids. We don't want to talk about Italian intelligence. We don't want to talk about any of that. We just want to talk about how she works as an Army reservist. And I'm picking on this one person. But she was in a bike race, an endurance sport where they often do blood doping and blood testing. So you would have Lance Armstrong, So we had pre-testing for before the race and post-testing, so they would have access to blood. So a military World Games is a perfect place to test a bioagent, because you test before the event, and then you can spray during the event, and then you test after the event and see what effect there was on the blood. So there was a lot of good reasons for me to want to delve into that story.
Yeah, that also remind me of that doctor, Black Doctors. You have written.
For people who don't know the Black Doctor murders, I wrote the Black Doctor murders. This is a hard one to believe, but the doctor that checked out the athletes after the at Fort Hood, before the athletes went and then after they came back, was murdered in his front yard in Virginia. I went to his house twice. And his wife was a nurse, also a colonel. Both of them were colonels. She was the doctor for Hillary Clinton in the Clinton White House during Bill Clinton's presidency. That's a pretty high level set of murders. And the first day that they tried to murder them, they was unsuccessful, and so the murderers came back 2 days later. They said it was a robber, but who tries to rob somebody and then comes back 2 days later? You know.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a crazy story.
And those guys were there to check the athletes from China. Yeah. So then there's another thing that popped into my head when we were talking about soldiers and how they can be used as a vector, right? Mm-hmm. And also, and when you mentioned Armstrong, right? These athletes and soldiers, very fit, they're perfect way to test new vaccines and viruses on them, because they have robust immune system and they can develop antibodies, right? Mm-hmm. And that's also kind of the way they can find antibodies for use for commercial purposes, right?
Yeah. So this wasn't a hunch of mine. I had a partner who's now deceased, but she was a cop, and she had worked later gone into consulting or rehabilitation for veterans that mm-hmm. were in danger of committing suicide. So these are the people that are very depressed and they're in danger of committing suicide. And a lot of them work for the Joint Special Operations Command. This is our special forces. Mm-hmm. You guys have the Slovenia Special Forces. we have the 82nd Airborne and others. Okay. But anyway, she was in California, and she was saying that there was a spray that they would spray, sort of like they did in Gulf War syndrome with the burning pits, but the spray that they would spray the terrorists like Osama bin Laden out in the caves, and that would be like a primary coating, and then there was a secondary that would take out parts of the immune system so that you would get shortness of breath, you wouldn't be able to climb the hills anymore, and plus you would leave tags in the person either on the outside of their clothing or potentially even on the inside that could tell that they were terrorists.
So okay. You can track them.
So that's what she said the program was, and I didn't really think anything of it. She died, and I spent a lot of time looking for that. But then when COVID hit, I started thinking, is that the same thing? Mm-hmm. Because there was, right before COVID hit with this thing, there was all these vaping deaths in the United States. And she had said that there was this Pakistani guy named Tahir Javid that sold this vape that was the secondary. Mm-hmm. So in a binary biological weapon, you have the primary, which is some kind of spray, and then there's a secondary,
which does the job.
Which together,
yeah,
they have the effect of reducing the breath or endurance or stamina, and sometimes heart attack. You know, if the person stresses themselves out enough in battle or whatever, they'll get a heart attack. So, and I do see some evidence. You look at all this evidence that's coming out now with all these young soccer athletes having these heart attacks. You know,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So this question is, you probably, in a way, you already answered to some degree, but did the pandemic supervirus appear by zoonosis or gain of function?
Yeah. Here's how it went. Bats, 7 different types of bats all flew to Wuhan fish market where they don't sell bats. But the bats all agreed in advance that that's where they would have the big bat meeting.
Yeah.
But they decided that wasn't enough because there wasn't enough
Excitement.
So they invited civets from Africa. And they only can roll into a ball, but somehow they rolled up a plane ramp and got on the plane and came to Wuhan. And then the hedgehog, you guys have hedgehogs here. They got on a plane and they got over there to Wuhan, and then they had this big orgy. And that's how coronavirus happened. Even though they don't sell civets at that market, they don't sell hedgehogs either. But all those pieces of DNA are in this virus. So to me, it's obvious that they've taken things. One, if you look at it from a bioweapons or bioagent point of view, it all starts making sense. If you know the hedgehog they've been using since World War I because you couldn't kill it with gas, right? Bayer and when they came out poison gas, you used the hedgehog because hey, if you can get the human to act like a hedgehog, hedgehog can eat a cobra, no problem, right? So there's the shield was the hedgehog, but maybe the bats also don't have an immune system that does what they call a cytokine storm that causes death. So you could test all you want and not kill your subjects if you use different kinds of bats. Civets have a receptor in the lungs, the ACE2 receptor, that's pretty darn close, along with ferrets, to the human receptor. So you can see why they would put all these things together in a laboratory, but the group animal orgy thing is not realistic.
No, and also there's a little thing called HIV insertion, right?
Yes. Well, there's a lot of things that ended up in there. There was a furin cleavage site that people have talked about, which is a human furin cleavage site, which animals never would develop. So that didn't make any sense. The Nobel laureate David Baltimore, when he first saw the furin cleavage site, said that's the smoking gun, that it's a bioweapon. So there's a lot going on there. But I wanted to go back to the thing I was talking about with the epidemiology. The State Department later came out with the cluster analysis and said the Wuhan Games was the first big cluster of the breakout, verifying what we said 2 years later. 2 years later, so the speculation...
You were a big conspiracy theorist, and now all of a sudden you're right?
My new nickname is Conspiracy Theorist Who Was Proven Right.
Yeah, that's right. There is quite a pretty good community, big community, let's say here in Slovenia, who see Robert Malone as a kind of whistleblower. He says many good things, many things that we trust him. We believe he's talking what seems to be right, but there's more to the story, right?
Yeah, well, he's sponsored by the Tobacco Institute. Okay, so a lot of people don't know that. He's been involved with a company called the Vapor Bar. So, that vapor, that could bring in a secondary, and that's the quickest way to the bloodstream through the lungs. Plus, the thing about vaping is people will do it voluntarily, and they'll self-dose 20 times a day.
Yeah, no restrictions.
No problem.
No COVID restriction necessary.
I don't need to force you into a line to give you a shot. They'll do it 20 times a day. Or same thing with cigarettes. So it's a much better vector. He worked on a cigarette vaccine and a vaping vaccine for U.S. soldiers in Iraq. So there's a lot of things he's done with, so was his wife, Jill Glasspool. So there's a lot of things he's not telling you, and a lot of things point to a secondary that would be, you take the two biomarkers together and you create this tag for the terrorist. The only thing, my concern is, I don't mind chasing terrorists that way, but I just don't want us to be the people that they're tagging as terrorists. Because we didn't do anything. We just were voting and talking here in the mayor's wonderful place.
Yeah,
so,
but, excuse me, but correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point in USA, just for saying things, you can be classified as a terrorist. You don't have to really do anything.
Watch list, FBI watch list, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm on it, believe me.
I have to say, yes.
Yeah, and that's civil rights, I think the European Union is talking about a statement of rights. There was the rights of man with the English, and we have the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. But there's, I believe, some kind of European statement of rights where you still have a right to privacy and a right to free speech still, right? I think, maybe.
Yeah, maybe on a paper.
No more. No more.
Yeah.
No more.
Today was this law that was violated our rights with this PCR checking.
What he's saying is that today
Today.
the court of the what you call the Supreme Court in the USA, but Slovene version, it's Constitutional Court, decided that the tests for PCT were not constitutional. The checking of people was against Constitution.
But
But it doesn't change anything for us really.
Yeah, it's after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's after
I
the.
called my lawyer and no money, no funny.
Oh, okay. That's why they call you Spitzel. I remembered that. Isn't that right? That's a family name. No, it's not your name. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
Yes, I heard you are suing Erasmus Lab in the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Netherlands. Why The Hague? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, supposedly when countries violate, commit war crimes and do crimes against humanity, you are supposed to be able to take them to the World Court if they've signed the Hague Convention. There's about 80 countries. The U.S. hasn't signed it. China didn't sign it. Russia didn't sign it. Ukraine didn't sign it. That's why you use Ukraine to do all your funny business, right?
Yeah.
But the Dutch did sign it, and that means the Erasmus Lab is under the jurisdiction. And to me, it's a war crime to create a gain of function. First of all, bring back Spanish flu. Can you believe that?
That's what they did in Erasmus Lab.
Bring back Spanish flu, and then do gain of function on coronavirus to make it more infective and more deadly. You know, those two things. That's war crimes.
Yeah. So let's now talk a little bit about Yugoslavia, foreign Yugoslavia.
Okay.
Because one thing that I noticed that Jan Stoltenberg is constantly mentioning Bosnia and Herzegovina in the context of Ukraine and Russia, which kind of worries me. So, yeah.
Well, I think Jens might have missed the 8,000 mujahideen that got flown into Bosnia. That's just a little detail that is important. And so I don't want, you know, like I said, going around to all the countries, everyone, I don't see any of that. Everyone's happy and good. And there had to be something coming in from the outside to ever create what happened. And I think it's better forgotten. I've spent my time with a lot of students who are just have all hope, and Zagreb is a beautiful town, and you know, I'm sure Ljubljana when I get there. Something else did that, came in for some other agenda, and it was to divide up the country. And it was a lot of Soros money, a lot of Kofar Black, and this mujahideen keeps getting moved, and wherever they go, there's these horrible things that happen. So I'm not saying Milosevic didn't do some really bad things. He did, but he was into a fight, a response.
The coordination of mujahideen and other, terrorists, or however you want to call them, is coordinated with secret network, which is encrypted, right?
Yes.
So now, can you tell us more about how that works?
When Wesley Clark, Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, was about ready to bomb a building in Belgrade. Remember, he bombed a building in Belgrade for 78 days.
Yeah.
They hit schools, they hit churches, they hit bridges, they hit factories
civilian
too.
Targets.
But a lot of civilian targets were hit. They could call on an encrypted BlackBerry military-grade phone given to them by the OSCE, supposedly peacemakers for the NATO, Organization of Security and whatever. And they could call and say, get out of the building, on encrypted BlackBerry phones, and they would get out of the building, and then NATO would hit it with a bomb.
Now, who is that
That's Wesley Clark, the
yeah.
Supreme Allied Commander, directly talking to the Kosovo Liberation Army
Yeah.
generals. Tachi, who runs Kosovo now, was one of them. Tachi was one of the KLA generals.
And he had this BlackBerry. No, BlackBerry. Yeah,
Blackberries.
Blackberries.
Yeah,
First
encrypted
use.
BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Dmitry Alperovich, the guy who ran the DNC hoax, that guy, he's the one who configured those BlackBerries way back then. So this is a long pattern with the Atlantic Council.
The reason why they use this is so that they can hide from the international institutions and
Yeah, all the intelligence agencies listen to you and I talking. And if I say, oh, let's go meet over here, and they see that, then we're going to get arrested or worse, right? But if it's encrypted, all they see is gobbledygook going back and forth between us. And so they were given that. NATO was saying, we want KLA to win. And we want Kosovo to be cut off the bottom of Serbia. And we want Vojvodina to be cut off the top of Serbia. And that's what happened.
Yeah, so here is also a concept that I figured out while following your channel, and that is that for Yugoslavia, whatever you think about socialist system, the major factor was the industry was nationalized, which means it was impossible to take it to for foreign interests to get hold of these industries, right? So that's probably the reason why it should be privatized, right? So that was and that's also the reason for slicing Yugoslavia, so that this infrastructure was available for foreign investments.
Well, I don't think the infrastructure, from what I've seen, there's some public infrastructure for trains and stuff, but I think it was to get the resources.
Yeah.
To get the precious metals.
And those was also state owned, right? And that's changed with the collapse of
That's
Yugoslavia.
the first thing they went for is the gold, the oil, and the gas, and the metal, and the war metals, and the trace metals.
The water now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I walked by a steel plant right here where by Tito used to live. I mean, I think if Elon Musk wants to make green cars, there's a factory right there. You can make your green cars right there. So I think Elon Musk, if he wants to sell his Teslas all over the world, he should at least finish the product, in some of these old factories that have been put out of business by Schengen and all that. So
now there are two more questions that I would like to address. And first, what's the latest and greatest in your research and with Neighborhood News Hours? Something that you want to share, and we are interested because one thing that I see now popping up in your Twitter is this toll receptor.
Yeah, I call it the 007 receptor. Because, it's easy to fall into this is sexy, this 007 receptor. That's the thing. But this toll receptor, I call it 007. It is a way of shutting down your immune system. If you're a male and you are fighting age, okay, I can create a nanoparticle that looks a lot like a real particle that shuts your immune system down to recognizing coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is you get sick like everybody else does, and everyone else just gets a cold. But since you don't understand and you don't develop a specific response for that, your body goes into cytokine storm and you overreact, and then you die
from your
heart attack
from your own immune response.
Your own immune system, or you end up creating a lot of scar tissue from a lot of non-specific general reactions called macrophages, where your body just kind of throws everything but the kitchen sink at it, but not the right thing.
Yeah.
Sort of like shooting like this.
Yeah, blind man.
Yeah. You use a lot more ammo and you hit the target a lot less, and that takes energy. And this is now been proven. Also, in the same research, that lupus, the thing, that is also toll receptor 7. Oh, now we're finding malaria.
Yeah,
Receptor 7.
And Lyme disease.
Lyme disease,
which is
receptor
interesting
7.
from our perspective, because when I was a kid, I heard that Nazis brought Lyme to Slovenia. That's the story that I've heard.
I know you're a victim of
I
Lyme
had
disease.
Lyme disease.
And if you look at Lyme disease, it's a lot like chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yeah.
Toll receptor 7. Congo Crimea hemorrhagic fever, toll receptor 7. Marburg disease, toll receptor 7. All these Nazi things, right? Ebola, receptor 7. HIV, toll receptor 7. So there's a lot of work I'm doing on that, and we found another Benassi. You're not going to believe this one. We found another Benassi, Enrico, working in an old bioweapons lab in Russia called Novosibirsk, which is so far out in Siberia you can't believe it. He's an Italian guy. What Italian guy with a Ferrari is going to go out to Novosibirsk? That's where they created the Russian bioweapons, anthrax, and all these viruses. He is working on nanoparticles to shut down toll receptor 7. And
So we can almost say, is what you're saying, all main diseases of today are manufactured? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that there is a certain set of ones that came out of the old Marburg German bioweapons program that all targeted toll receptor 7, and the reason is it simplifies your design. Okay, what we our innate immune response, the first thing your body does, knee-jerk reaction, is called the innate, and that is the ones that go all the way back to insects that we share. So you can target stuff actually doing pesticides. The same research Monsanto does for pesticides, you now can bring over and target toll receptor 7 because we share that with insects. Then when you get into the adaptive immunity, the stuff that takes weeks to develop, that's where we separate, from the insects. So all the old bioweapons targeted these things we share with insects.
Because they can then do the experiments with insect and will also infect human.
And then you can work your way all the way through all the mammals. You can bats, and you can do mice, and all the way to monkeys, and then to humans.
And then another thing...
Prisoners, soldiers,
Another name that pops up in your Twitter a lot is Heinz Feldman.
Heinz Feldman has spent his whole career working on 007. On toll receptor 7, on everything I just mentioned. And he is involved with 3 lab leaks. The lab that leaked out of Winnipeg, Canada, and where was all the stuff leaking from? 7 different trips by somebody who worked for him. To where? Wuhan. Okay. Who's the first person who took a picture of coronavirus? Rocky Mountain Lab in Montana. Who's there? Heinz Feldman. And somebody who worked for the Erasmus Labs took the first picture, okay? Where's the other lab he worked at? I went to the Marburg lab on this trip and talked to somebody who worked with him.
In Germany, right?
In Germany. And we talked about Ebola viruses, and I just confirmed everything that I had thought. And she said, yes, that's exactly what we're working on. So now, there would be no way that there could possibly be a NATO general with the same exact name, Heinz Feldman, in the Azovstal bunker. Because that would just be too creepy. It'd be like he was the guy who was the field guy administrating the stuff that Heinz was working on back in the lab. There just might be a Heinz Feldman in the Azovstal lab. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
So.
And then our community is closely tied with rock and alternative music. So just have to ask you about an amazing story.
Oh, this is the Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain told to one of your sources or somebody who you know.
I went to vacation in Mexico with a guy who was the godfather of Kurt Cobain. He was like a police officer, if I remember right, and he lived next door. And Kurt Cobain's family didn't spend a lot of time with him for some reason. It's kind of a latchkey kid, and he learned how to play guitar on the street and all this stuff. And he he basically said that Kurt Cobain was working at a mental health facility. I believe I can't remember what island it's on, but it's on an island.
Uh-huh,
I don't know if it's Vashon Island or not, but it was supposedly a place where they were doing all kinds of medical drug experiments, like CIA, MK Ultra type stuff. This is crazy, weird conspiracy theory. So I don't touch on it. I don't never mention it. But he did say that, they were experimenting on women, drugging women, and and that was like giving him nightmares and stuff because he didn't say anything about it. And Frances Farmer, revenge for Frances Farmer. Where's her revenge going to be?
In
Seattle.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if Frances Farmer was at that facility. I didn't know that. She didn't know.
I don't know, but she ended up in a mental institution also, right?
Yeah.
But it was before Kurt Cobain.
But I actually knew the PhD who worked later on at Madigan Army Hospital there at McCord Air Force Base, and he was a nice guy. But I don't know what happened before that. But I didn't know Frances Farmer was there. So there's your trivia.
Yeah, I had to ask that because So now I will open up this conversation for.
I have a question. What is your prediction for winter 22, or what can we do to stay alive?
Well,
if this agenda and you have this corona thing and you have this war, lot of fear, we are all scared. The most old people, and they are the main. What now? I think this. What can we expect 3 months from now?
Well, I think my prediction probably it doesn't mean anything, but the previous CDC director that on his watch coronavirus broke out on Redfield says there's going to be another pandemic, a dark winter with H5N1, bird flu, swine flu together. That's been moved over to humans by the Erasmus lab. That's what they say is coming. The same way to beat it is with the home remedies, I think. I mean, HCQ and I think ivermectin kind of knocked out the punch of coronavirus, and not nearly as many people died as they thought would. And I think they're going to have to come up with something like that. And then the other thing is expose the dark hand. Otherwise, it keeps happening. Expose who's doing this. Otherwise, it just keeps happening.
Well, if you have money, where will you go?
If I have the money?
No, you have money. No, but if
that's like saying if I had a jet, I would go visit Elon Musk.
If some place on the earth that is not globalized.
Oh.
To avoid.
Before transformation.
I'll tell you this. I used to think Czechoslovakia was the Bohemian poet capital of the world because I had gone there right after World War II, right after the fall of the Soviet Union. But no, it's Bystrica. Yeah, that's where it is. This is the new Bohemian poet, artist, writer, poet, musician. Shakespeare expert, everything. Plus you have to farm, plus you have to grow grapes.
2 tractors.
I would come right here.
Do you believe in God?
Yeah, I would come here.
Do you believe in God?
Yes. Yes, very much so. And I haven't been up the Holy Mountain yet, though, but I want to.
That's very good to finish, but I do have a question, 2 questions.
Sure.
First, now we heard a lot about the chemical factories in all the countries. Do you think the Russian invasion to Ukraine, because of the supposed chemical factory, is justified with that, like the USA invasion to Iraq because of the same reason? Do you think, can we say today this invasion is justified with some chemical factory which are not approved yet?
Yeah.
It's a very big question, because
I agree.
we have an invasion. Could we justify any invasion in other country because of somebody think they're doing something wrong?
Well, I think preemptive strikes, you need to have a tremendous amount of proof before you can justify a preemptive strike. But what I'm calling out is Americans' hypocrisy, because Colin Powell shook the yellow cake and said that's why we were going to attack Iraq, and we started a 20-year war, and it turned out there wasn't the WMD. So how can Americans now say with Putin, and Lavrov say that's why they're going in, how can they be so high on their horse, after 20 years? But I don't agree with the preemptive unless you show tremendous amount of evidence. John F. Kennedy, before the Cuban Missile Crisis, he said, there's the launcher 1, there's launcher 2, there's launcher 3. And he didn't invade. He said, we're going to do a quarantine. So I think maybe a quarantine, I don't know how you do a quarantine without doing what Putin did, but something less than, maybe just like moving into Donetsk and Lugansk in a protective way or something like that, where the people invited him in rather than, full-scale invasion.
You don't approve to...
No, I don't approve, unless you had more proof. That's why I say now he needs to put the proof out. He's done 3 releases that sort of show documents, but he needs to show the actual, vials of this stuff, and he needs scientists who say
Because there was any proof to find a chemical weapon in Iraq. So we do have some history experience of this.
Historical precedent.
Just the aggression of some big countries, powerful country. So I think world should say no.
Right.
To all.
I agree with you. Disapprove.
Now we have the other question. So we discussed a lot of corona issues last 2 years. A lot of conspiracy ideas, how the corona... we heard every chemical or medical institute has something to do with corona, because the corona was not so dangerous virus.
Yeah.
But do we have the other solutions to prevent all these dyings between this corona epidemic without the repressions? Is there any other reason, other way, except the mask, the limitations, the temporary limitation, the freedom of people? So is there any other, because all the world is doing the same, actually, almost.
I think transparency in these programs is the #1 thing, and if you do them under the secrecy of the State Department, diplomatic immunity, then you hide from people. And if we're all trying to solve disease together, we should share more information. In the breakout of the World Military Games, they didn't share the information. They held the information. They destroyed the patient records. They didn't share the blood samples of the State Department, etc. Now, the person that I talked about in March 2020, when CNN came after me in 60 Minutes, they were the person who did the training for the people at the Wuhan lab, which turned out to have a leak in September, where lab employees got sick, was Virginia Benassi, the same person who was getting the bids. Now, if,
the Benassi surname is 2000's common surname in the world, so it's very often in India, and so it could be.
Yeah, it could be. All I'm saying is, as a reporter, I need to follow the money and follow
Trace the money.
And trace the intelligence agencies and see what happens. So that's.
I have one question. Are the Putin and this your president of America and China the dogs of transhumanism? Are they the players of the same team?
I think the dogs of transhumanism are Klaus Schwab and Elon Musk.
Yeah,
because and Bill Gates, they talk about putting chips in people's heads and stuff.
Okay.
I don't know. That's pretty transhuman to me.
I think that they are like bodies in the game.
Oh yeah, yeah. Front men.
For us.
Front
You
men.
don't see but this is minor.
Like Dennis Rodman in North Korea.
Yeah, front man. He's not making any decisions. Yeah. That is from North Korea.
If we put more things into the perspective of the corona itself, and if we start thinking why European Union is enforcing the Green Pass, why is happening the crisis with energetics, with prices of electricity, prices of the oil. Was not the Ukraine war pushed on the door of Putin, and he was provoked just to get an excuse and start collapsing the whole economy of the world? Because if we now see that with the corona they don't get the results that they wanted, and now they are trying other means to force the people to give over the sovereignty, so the state will decide everything for us. So can we speculate that the war in Ukraine is just another leverage, just like COVID was, to get the final results from the eugenic agenda that's coming from Davos, from Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, and that everything is bought up, the United Nations, European Union, the fucking von der Leyen, that everything adds up in one whole story of World Great Reset, and that we are all doomed. How can we save us from this humanization, and what should we do now to stop this insanity that's happening around us?
Well, it's great to get a question from Stop the Lying Media, because we hear about these organizations over in America. We don't even believe they exist. How could anybody be so great? But he's sitting right here. Robert's sitting right here. So I know you're real. Thank you for asking the question. And it's really an honor to get a question from Stop the Lying Media. I think there's a lot packed into that question. I think the answer for me has always been expose the dark hand. One of my favorite American movies is The Wizard of Oz, and at the end, the all-powerful NATO Oz, is behind the curtain, and they're putting Corona-colored puffs of smoke up, and they're putting up Ukraine war, and the little dog Toto goes in there. Little dog Toto pulls the curtain back, and everybody sees it's a smoke show, right? So I am always focused on the easiest thing to do is to pull the curtain back on the people who run these things. Carl Bildt, I'll name names, of NATO, going all the way back to the Kosovo War and the OHR office that got created out of thin air. Okay, and I agree with this WHO treaty that you're saying, which is Tedros. Yeah. Again, he's a war criminal from his own country. He missed cholera in his own country 3 times as a health minister. How do you get a promotion to a dog catcher, let alone to running the WHO?
With the Chinese money.
Yeah. So I think this is how we do it. And just like the home remedy of HCQ and the home remedy of ivermectin, I think somebody will figure out a way for this H5N1 if they throw that at us. And I think organizations like yours are the ones that expose the dark hand, and that's the way. That's the only way. It's the only way.
Can I expand this theory?
Sure.
We know that in the space a lot of things is happening, and nobody is telling people that sun goes through some periods, and that we are on the verge of some shitty global ice age that is coming, and nobody knows when exactly it will come. Is it possible that global money is trying to bunker itself up, erase the majority of the population just to survive, just to keep their own genes in survival attempt of the cycles that our sun is preparing for us?
Well, I don't know much about that, but if Azovstal, after this war is over, turns into a luxury yacht place, you'll know that the guys who caused the war got the land and made it into a giant, Disneyland.
Well,
I think that's what's coming. I think that happened after World War II in Europe, right? All the bombing, and then the Reconstruction money came in, and a lot of people took advantage of that. A lot of Jewish people had all their money taken and family wiped out, and so and different people came in and did different things. So I don't really know about any Ice Age or any of that. I think every person like yourself and myself has a voice, and we can lay out the facts and let everybody decide for themselves.
we know that the environmental fascism is coming on the big door with big steps, with Webb forum, and there has to be a story behind it. So the limitations will come.
Yeah. Well, I think there's that group that you're talking about, the Great Reset group, has invested heavily in nuclear and small nuclear. Bill Gates is pushing the small nuclear. Elon Musk is pushing the lithium batteries for everything, because you can use the stuff from a nuclear power plant at night when there's low demand. So I think, I'm not saying you're not right with all these limitations. I'm not saying they're not hacking the supply systems and all those things. But again, if you say Dmitry Alperovich and the group in Kiev, which is the SBU or the Kraken or the Alpha group, the old Spetsnaz group there, is doing this every time, we don't have to boil the ocean. We can go right to their door and say, why are you hacking and burning our things? We have to look at the dark hand, because it's too massive and it's too depressing if you just try to fight everything at once. And I've chosen a very few targets, but I think you're right on the money. Klaus Schwab would be Henry Kissinger and Klaus Schwab, close second. Yeah, I think you're right on the money.
Running the show.
Yeah, they are. I agree with that 100%. 100%. Not the global leaders they put in, that Soros puts in.
If we look now the internal logistics of the transport in China, we can see it stopped completely. Just world doesn't know it yet. So what will happen with the economy of the world? Yeah, and now we have artificial energy crisis here in Europe because of von der Leyen, and because we need the war with Ukraine. What can we expect this autumn? Will we have enough to eat? That's the question, because China bought up the 60% of all the grain production in the whole fucking world. So
I really think a negotiated settlement right now, which is 2 autonomous zones for the eastern Ukraine, which is what those people deserve to protect their own people, and if some.
Can I say?
I think that is the solution to bring down the war, and then that gets Europe your gas supply back. That gets back your bread, your wheat, and your food, and your commerce. That you sell products to Russia. So I think all those things need to happen right now. Right now.
Yeah, and I would just want to point out that I agree with you. Russia shouldn't react the way Russia reacted with invasion, right? But I have to also point out that Russia and Donetsk and Lugansk, they begged European Union, United Nations, NATO, everybody, to stop with brutal ethnic cleansing in Donbass. Nobody did a goddamn thing.
Ever since they overthrew Yanukovych, that war started immediately, and Azov immediately started in on the ethnic cleansing. So that can't be washed away, and so I'm not saying Putin is justified, but I am saying that he had some reason, right? So
that's you answered better than.
How do you sleep at night?
I sleep in the best accommodations in all of the streets here.
When you go away from Bistritz,
I'm close to Simon. Not that close, but close enough.
Close enough.
No, it's been wonderful. Thank you for your great hospitality here. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was great playing in your band or playing with your band. These guys are incredible. And you guys are doing the cultural center over there. Is that a cultural center over there on the Schengen?
This is all cultural center.
This is all cultural center, okay.
You entered when you came into the municipality.
Oh, okay.
The whole local community is cultural center.
Yeah, it is.
Because we have a lot of different music fans, different styles, different culture, and I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of that to have to come closer. Also, the people who have a different political opinion.
Yeah.
Because we need to have conversation. We need to try to understand the other one, even if have a different thinking or look on the way. So this is very important.
Yeah.
To have an open discussion and to support those very low the country which cannot reach the money because they are means for some other things, not for earning the money.
Right.
And this is very important. The local community, we have a very good approach to that, and we are proud of them.
Yeah, I want to compliment you because even if you don't have a lot of money, you still have a lot of fun. and create things every day. And so this reminds me so much of Prague. You know, before the artist community on the Charles Bridge, there was an artist community, and everybody's painting something or doing paint composition. So
one personal question. How do you get from state to state with all these checkups? And do you believe in COVID shots?
Well, I took a COVID shot so that I could travel to Europe, and it was a tough personal decision. But I needed to go to visit, and there were some countries where there was no choice. Mm. But I don't believe in the COVID mandate for something that affects 1% of the population, and stay home if you're sick, and if you're old, and wear a mask or whatever. But I did take the J&J. I didn't take the mRNA because I think it's completely experimental and doesn't work. Pfizer just came out with a 80,000 page document that said only 12% got protection. So
and for 7 days.
Yeah, for all this stuff we've been doing, 12% effective, and this is completely experimental. And the thing that really scares me is the long-term effects. We had polio vaccine in America. We had this Cutter Industries that put stuff into it, SV40, and then it turned out it caused cancer. It turned out it caused HIV. That's not a very good trade-off. I know it's 20 years later, but still not a good trade-off. So experimental vaccines don't make any sense to me at all. How could that not be worse than the cure, be worse than the original cause?
And how can you mandate them, right? That's even if you
an experimental vaccine. How can you mandate an experimental vaccine that you don't have any idea what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Just crazy. But hopefully that's over. Hopefully the 2 years is over.
I think they just got warmed up.
I think you might be right, but I think there will be, protests. There was protests in Ljubljana, and then there was protests in
also in Zagreb, Austria.
Huge protests in Zagreb. And, London had a huge protest. Australia had huge protests, and I think it's not going to happen anymore. I think people have been through it. Now they understand that they don't trust the government like they did. They don't trust the experts like they did. I know you're saying they're just getting started, and I believe you. And I believe you.
The legislation is, they are preparing the legislation that's completely swamped with documents that are coming from World Economic Forum. Every goddamn fucking document that you take and check from our country or Croatian country, or you check in Holland or in Germany, everywhere you have leads that are leads from words, etc. that is coming from Davos. So
Yeah.
there
Well,
is no end.
if you don't say the right words from the World Economic Forum, you don't get the loan from the World Bank, right? Or one of the banks. So you have to kind of play the game a little bit. But there is a problem.
There is no game in Ukraine. There is a real war.
Oh, I know.
It's happening
Yeah.
to reset the economy.
But the same thing
Yeah.
happened also in Ukraine, right? At the time of Yanukovych, right? They were deeply in debt, and the proposal European Union gave them was impossible for him to agree with. That's what started, as far as I understand the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think he also didn't want to go with the full bio agents,
Yeah.
all the labs, and that the West didn't like that because they had already invested a lot in the labs, and Newland had, and Kagan, and they wanted to push their agenda, push the border closer. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'll do podcasts with you, and we'll track it. How's that?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm all up for it.
Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds good.
Okay.
What about America? Global capital are interesting to America is safe for a few years, or America is still a country, or Republicans, Democrats, blue countries, red countries, it's there now a problem or not with this Biden, America, Russia, which country will fall apart first?
Well, the old Soviet Union already did fall apart, and I
What?
think
Didn't understand.
the old Soviet Union
Already.
Uh,
yeah.
fell.
No, yeah, but this is like now
But-
Russia, America is not now cool because
We don't.
people say that there are two kinds of countries. One where is a lot of restrictions and one that isn't. Or America is not so cool.
Well, that's how we are with each state. Some states are all locked down, some states are not. So you can move to states that are not. I think we can live together. I really don't think it's smart for us to have a nuclear, argument every day where we threaten each other with nuclear weapons. That's a bad, that's a.
Better to make a war somewhere else.
Yeah, let's have a discussion. Let's talk a little bit, So yeah.
So I would like to thank you, George Webb. I'm very grateful that he came to Slovenia. I was so excited when he came here, and like he said, that this also Mayor said, and George, of course, the conversation is the way, right? And so that's what we hear.
Thanks, Simon. Okay. All right.
Thank you, George.
Okay.